organisms were getting their energy through light, and then at some point it made sense that those organisms then contained enough energy to be consumed themselves. And if you wanted to do that and make use of it, though, kind of made sense that you were able to move and that you were able to travel to go get one and the other.
If there's a lot more chance involved if you're just sort of bobbing about waiting for things to bump into you that you can eat.
Yeah, those guys aren't going to survive for very long, but the ones that are able to actively target their lunch are going to be able to do that. So, out of movement, a couple of things will evolve first. So, light sensitivity will probably be a really useful thing to have, specifically because what you're eating is going to be stuff that feeds off light. So, the kind of old hunting adage of you go where if you want to find your food, you go where your food eats its food. So you'll go around water or grassland or whatever it is that you're trying to find. But
fried chicken on Friday night. No, sorry, David.
Yeah, exactly. So movement became the thing, and all of these mechanisms basically just became the who's got the better movement skills to find the bigger lunch. So we start being able to move better and move better and move better, and that kind of goes on and on and on until we get to
levels of complication.
Yeah, so we get to kind of present day humans, where, or even in other mammals, let's say, where for up to that point, most of the time we're thinking about movement. Now we start to be able to think about other things as well. So there's a number of tests that people use to see whether animals have consciousness, which means we think that they can think about themselves, and things that might not necessarily equal movement or might not necessarily mean movement. Some of those are, they'll get the animal to look at itself in the mirror and they'll put a little mark on their forehead, and if they're able to, if it looks like they notice the mark, if it looks like they're affected by it, then that means they probably realize that that's them, and they'll actively try and do something about it. And in humans, obviously, then it's even more complicated. We can talk. We have language. We have the best system available of communicating with other people. So when we get to these kind of levels, the other thing humans can do as well is imagine things that don't even exist. So you can draw pictures of stuff that was never real and things like that. People might then start to argue, well, actually, that's not really movement anymore. Like you can talk to people, you could spend your whole day daydreaming. You can wake up and actually have a really interesting day where you didn't get out of bed. You just thought of things that might happen, things that could happen, imagine things that definitely won't happen because they're not real. But actually, all of those things still require movement to exist.
And those kind of thoughts can also cause physiological changes. Do you ever have a big test coming up and you get really nervous and it makes you feel physically sick? So thoughts have weight with them.
Yeah, those thoughts can have physical changes in your body. The language one is, I guess, where that starts. And actually, if we think about language, well, we have to think first about talking. Well, talking is a movement. You're controlling your throat and you're moving your jaw and your lips and your face. And actually, earlier language of that is body language, which is all based around physical movements. But then let's also think about why language exists in the first place. It's not very useful if the thing that you're talking to isn't also able to move. So we didn't invent language to start talking to trees and rocks. We invented to start talking to other people, and other animals can sometimes understand language, and we can give basic commands and things, but in terms of its usefulness, it's only useful because all the other things can move. And then when we think of all of that higher order thinking, most of us would imagine we do this from like that inner monologue. You know, we've got that internal voice.
The driver, some people call them.
The driver.
Yeah, sitting out the front.
Yeah, or the little angel and demon that's,
Yeah.
why don't you have another donut? Or, please don't.
Yeah, all right. No. But yeah.
So you got that internal monologue that is, you means you don't have to say everything out loud to think it. You can think thoughts in your head without having to say them. And for a lot of people, they'll agree that that does have language. It uses language. While you might not necessarily think every single word out in your head, you kind of tend to think in words and sentences. Well, would you be able to do that if you didn't first develop the ability to speak language out loud? And I know of a lot of books I've read about child development where they suggest that the reason small toddlers talk so much is because they haven't quite yet learned how to put it all internally. They're still practicing being able to say all the words, being able to make all the words. While they're saying it, then their ears are picking up what it sounds like.
Yeah, and they're practicing the understanding.
Yeah, and they practice like, well, what does this mean, and how do I relate this to anything for the other parts of my brain? How do all those things match and link up? And once they get good at that, they get good at just thinking about how that would be, and eventually the internal monologue just moves straight to their head.
Yeah.
And if you follow that kind of pattern and logic, pretty much everything that comes after that only exists because movement existed to begin with.